Hey, what's up, everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to episode number 77 of the In a Crowded Room podcast, which we're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Man, is this story crazy. I'll tell you what's really crazy is the first time I ever heard about Jeffrey Epstein was probably 5 years ago when I was first introduced to Alex Jones. He was going off about Epstein and all these connections that, really powerful American politicians, including the Clintons, had to this Epstein, and that he had a private plane called the Lolita Express and this private island. And, there was this pedophile ring that he was running. And Alex Jones has always been on the satanic pedophile ring stuff. And, it's really crazy when you look in to the story and the history of Jeffrey Epstein. Here's this guy that basically made his billions as a financial advisor to the uber powerful and the world's most wealthy individuals. Yet nobody really knows how Epstein made his money. There's no clear paper trail. He doesn't have like any company you can point to that he created that, went global. He doesn't have, anything in his past that is recognizable. It's just like he just shows up and he's connected to, all of these incredibly powerful, wealthy politicians, businessmen. And yes, he has this island. And he has this plane that is known as the Lolita Express. And it turns out that Bill Clinton has been on this plane 27 times. Now some people argue and say, well, it was actually 4 long flights that he was on. And I'm like, does that make sense? He took 4 flights and each of them had 6 legs? That doesn't make any sense to me. But regardless, I think the question is, why is he on it at all? Why is he on it at all? And the reason Epstein is in the news, if you haven't heard, which I'm assuming we all have now, is that a couple years ago, he was arrested and charged with basically counts of underage sexual conduct. I don't know the official charge that he got, but essentially, the average human being, had they been charged with what he was charged with in the past, they'd be doing a ton of time. I mean, many, many years in prison. And he got off basically with a hand slap. So years later, he gets arrested and this time charged again with essentially being basically a pimp. A pimp to the uber powerful. And this time around, it appears as though a lot of names and a lot of inside information is going to come out. The FBI raided his island. There was 2,000 documents that were sealed in his indictment that were unsealed 2 days before he committed suicide in prison. And this is where the story gets really strange. He initially tried to kill himself in prison, in which they were able to thwart this suicide attempt. So they moved him into round-the-clock custody, where they could basically watch him 24/7, and they gave him a roommate. Now, typically, when someone in prison goes on a security watch and they put him with a roommate, they put him with a non-violent roommate. They put him with, someone who was, busted for securities fraud or something like that. Somebody that could keep an eye on them to make sure that they don't commit suicide. I don't know if you guys saw it or not, but the fucking incredible Hulk figure that they put Jeffrey with. I mean, this guy looks straight off the prison yard videos you see on YouTube with these dudes that are just monsters. They're like bodybuilders. So they initially, after he tried to commit suicide, they put him in a cell with just a psychopath. That, from what I understand, and from what I read, roughed him up pretty good. So rather than watching to make sure that he doesn't commit suicide, this big son of a bitch that they put him with attacked him, hurt him, beat him up. So he's still on suicide watch. Now he's just got somebody in there that's, hurting him. So why? Why did that initially happen? Well, shortly after this guy roughed him up, Epstein is now moved to an isolated cell. He was supposed to be on a 24/7 suicide watch, in which both the security guards that were also supposed to be watching him reportedly fell asleep. At the same time, the cameras in the cell where Jeffrey committed suicide were shut off. So you tell me, does this sound suspicious to you? Now, there are early reports on multiple different websites, and I don't know how accurate they are, but supposedly, after the first suicide attempt, Epstein told family members that he was not suicidal. That he did not want to kill himself. Supposedly, somebody was trying to hurt him. Well, ultimately, we'll never know because there's no footage and there's no witnesses to Jeffrey Epstein's suicide. The thing about sexuality, think how powerful sexuality is. It matters in everyone's life, right? Sex, it matters in everyone's life. If you're not having it, you want to be having it. And it's something people think about a lot. Well, think about like I said, the uber wealthy. When you have so much money that the law doesn't even apply to you. I would like to believe, and I do believe, that 95% of people are good people. But just like in the normal world where you hear about, these perversions of sexuality, in the world of financial giants, there's also going to be people that have sexual perversions, that have really, weird sexual tastes. And it might not even start out like that. There was this documentary I watched a while ago about Jake the Snake Roberts. And Jake talked about how, when he first married his wife was just beautiful. And he loved having sex with her. They had a really healthy sex life. And then he would go on the road like a lot of touring entertainers. And he would cheat on his wife. And he said it would start out with me and another girl. And then pretty soon it's me and 2 other women. And then he says pretty soon it's me, 2 other women, and 5 lines of coke. And pretty soon I'm having these women do really, really perverted things to themselves. And, the point being is that he keeps raising the bar. And the depravity of his mind is just going wild because he has the opportunity to explore the darkest reaches of his mind and his sexuality. And here's this ultra aggressive alpha male that just has women that will do anything he wants. He actually gets to the point in the documentary where he's like, yeah, I don't want to keep, he's listing all these things that he's done. And he finally stops realizing that, it gets even darker. And he was starting, I believe he was about to talk about, the physical side of hurting women during sex. And his point being is that the bar was raised so much that after touring, he would go home and he just couldn't have sex with his wife anymore. He just couldn't get excited. After getting doped up and, like I said, having 2, 3 women in a bed to do whatever he wanted and just carrying out the darkest shit in his mind. He would go home and his wife would just want to, kiss and hug on him and have, I guess, what someone referred to as vanilla sex. And he didn't want it. He couldn't do it. He couldn't perform. So he had to start getting Viagra and shit like that. Well, now think about this on the uber wealthy level. When you're that wealthy, I'm assuming it starts out the same way where, you have, first it's a girl, then it's a gorgeous girl, then it's a Russian girl, then it's a Mexican girl, then it's a black girl, and then it's 2 girls, then it's 3 girls, then it's weird shit, and they'll just keep going. And some of them are going to have really crazy, perverted deviancy in their mind, a really dark side to sex. And for those that want to carry that out, remember, the law doesn't apply to the super wealthy. It appears as though for those who wanted to carry those things out and to cross into boundaries that are just fucking disturbing, young women, young boys, if you believe what's been written about Jimmy Savile and his case, over 500 cases of child molestation came against him. They were having sex with underage children and killing them afterwards. Jimmy Savile reportedly had an infatuation with necrophilia, which is sleeping with dead bodies. So this shit is dark. This shit is dark. And for the people who want to engage in something like that, you need a Jeffrey Epstein. You need someone that can fly you into a controlled situation on an island where there's no law, there's no anything. But remember, once they're there, there has to be surveillance. There has to be surveillance around that place. There can't not be. And if there's surveillance, that means Jeffrey Epstein has a lot of shit on a lot of people. Now, there are some that say Epstein was a spy, possibly involved with Israel intelligence. There's others that say he was just a sicko. He was a guy who would put together events for those who are, into really super dark, illegal sexual stuff. But what's really interesting to me is all this stuff is starting to come out. All of this stuff is starting to come out. I told you before about my friend who was present at a Hollywood party, in which there was a person that was there that was brought in and paid to basically have group sex, and this person did not have HIV, but everybody at the party did. And the whole point was that they were going to infect this person with HIV, and they paid him a lot of money to basically infect him. Now that is dark, guys. That's dark. And the person who told me, I know that, yeah, I believe it. And my good friend George, who I told you passed away, one of the nicest guys I've ever come across. George was born and raised here, and unfortunately he suffered with a heroin addiction most of his life, and it gave him complications at a very young age to cancer. And he passed away, but we were talking about the Hollywood Hills, and he used to always say, "You don't hang out there, do you see?" And I'd be like, "No." He was like, "Please don't, man. God turned his back on those hills, man." And he used to always tell me, "Stay away from the hills." And I did. I've never been one to, go party in the Hollywood Hills just because I've heard so many dark things about it. But one of the rumors is that just like Jeffrey Epstein, there are people in the Hollywood Hills that hold these underage, sexual parties. And specifically, there's a very famous director, and I don't want to say his name because he'll probably probably sue me, but there's a very, very well-known famous director that is involved in superhero films. If you dig on the web, that'll probably be enough for you to find his name. But supposedly, he often has underage parties. George told me that he was at one. 3 a.m. came, and basically a person went through the party and said, we're about ready to engage in this, group sex thing with young boys and girls, in which George said, wait a minute, well, young like 20? And they're like, no, young. And he, got the fuck out of there. But we're starting to see that these things are real. Alex Jones was dead on. And I'm not an Alex Jones fan. And I'm not like, supporting Alex Jones. Like, he's the man. But he was dead fucking on. He called all of this like 5-6 years ago. So all of this stuff starting to come out. I don't know if you guys watched the documentary The Family on Netflix. That gets heavy into the New World Order and the right-wing Christian elitist groups that believe that they're chosen, that are deeply embedded in our legal system, our political system. People are starting to see that things like the New World Order and Bilderberg and these stories of Jeffrey Epstein, Jimmy Savile, like all of this stuff. All of this stuff is real, and it's coming out. It's coming out. And it's somewhat scary when you really think about that the more money you have, the less rules you have to live by. And when given, carte blanche to the world to do what you choose, that there's a contingency of people that would engage in these types of underage sex parties. It's like, what does that say about, the psyche of mankind? I mean, what's really strange? About 2 years ago, there's a gal I know that I'm friends with that is in the adult film industry. She's not heavy in it. She's done a couple of guy-girl scenes, that's it. But I was interested in her story because she was a small-town girl from North Carolina that came out here to be an actress and, of course, wound up in porn. But through considering doing a documentary project about her, I had hopped on some of these free porn sites. And I'll be honest, guys, I had just not watched any porn for probably a decade, man. I mean... And maybe I'm just fortunate that that I have that I prefer the real thing, and maybe I'm fortunate that I never had to turn to porn, because ultimately I don't necessarily think porn is a horrible thing. I think it depends on the circumstances in which it's made, and because getting to my point here is that now that porn is free on these websites. And these sites are basically making money off ad dollars. The most popular stuff is going to be the stuff that's on the front page. It's like right there to watch. And is it me, or holy shit, did porn get really violent towards women? I know there's always been, aggressive porn, of course, but dark shit, man. That's what I took away from it. I spent probably about an hour online on a couple sites. God, well, I probably shouldn't even shout them out. But yeah, a couple free porn sites. And again, this is a couple years ago. And I was just blown away by how just dark porn has got, especially just a lot of stuff beating and abusing women. Like to the point where I was like, man, this has to like borderline illegality, you know? People are like, well, no, I mean, if they agree to do it, they're paid. I'm like, yeah, but, you know, there's a difference between accepting cash to do something because you're fucked in life versus I want to do something, you know? And there was just some really disturbing stuff that I found that it made me ask the question. It's like, is this what people want? Like when you make porn free and you can, you know, consume as much of it as you want, does the psyche go to these dark places all the time? And I don't know the answer to that, but I just remember thinking there was nothing arousing about it. It was just, I was just sitting there just going, man, it just clip after clip after clip. It was just really abusive stuff. And it freaked me out, man. It really did. It freaked me out. Because I'm like, you know, in a world where dollars don't apply now to porn, right? You could watch anything you want. You know, the overall curve of pornography seems to have gone to a violent place. You know, so again, when I look at, you know, the ultra wealthy, it's really terrifying when you think about why these circles would exist. You know, it really makes you, at least me, it makes me really wonder about this whole concept of good versus evil in the world. You know, because I could tell you right now, I know plenty of, you know, super wealthy, successful people that, of course, are not engaged in anything like that. You know, but the numbers are the numbers. I mean, you know, this Jeffrey Epstein, this guy was involved with a lot of people that you would never otherwise suspect that would be involved with him. I mean, even, you know, the biggest name, obviously, that's come out around the whole thing is Bill Clinton. And the question is, for real, what the fuck was Bill doing on that plane? And what was he doing on that island? Maybe the answer is innocent. Maybe it is. You know, but you're talking about a guy with known past sexual, you know, issues with multiple women and often younger. Now, you know, I stopped short of saying, you know, he did it, because you don't know that I don't know. I don't know what he did or didn't do. But I wish he would step forward and just say, if he's completely innocent of any wrongdoing, I wish Bill Clinton would just step forward and go, hey, listen, you know, the guy was helping me out with money. He invited me to a party. I went to the party. Everything was cool. Everything was normal, you know. But it's radio silence as Epstein, you know, is no longer on this planet, you know. Dead men can't tell secrets, you know. But these, you know, these secret groups exist, man, you know. Whether, like I said, whether it be the family, the Skulls, the Bilderbergs, the NWO, like, you know, all of these groups exist. And forever people have just kind of shook their head and said, oh, conspiracy theorist. But now we're seeing that that's not the case. That these wacko groups exist. And you see it out here in Hollywood every day, even though, you know, you might not put a name to a face. But the reason I'm not surprised that he would call his plane the Lolita Express and that this island would be so well known is, for some reason, the ultra powerful and wealthy, they love to just hide shit in broad daylight. They love to present it and just make it right. They just make it right by shoving it in your face. And one of the biggest examples is Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner, here's a guy that was, 70 some years old that had 18-year-old girlfriends. He'd line them up 3, 4 at a time. And would roll around and be like, yep, these are my girlfriends. We have sex. We all get into bed, me and these 4 young girls. And the guy literally lived in his bathroom robe so he could fuck whenever he was ready. Most people don't realize that that's why he rocked that robe. That was the inside joke in Hollywood. He was always ready to fuck. How ridiculous is that, guys? Just shoved right in your face. Just shoved right in your face. They're putting up 5G internet right now outside my place. So if you hear some banging around or screeching in the background, that's what that is. But think about it. I mean, Hugh Hefner just shoved it in your face. And this happens a lot, where these people, it's not enough to do what you want to do, but you want to just put it out there and make it right. Change the rules, change the environment. Live in a world in which you can make your world whatever you want it to be. That's why you get things like the Lolita Express. I mean, if a guy was a trafficker of young women, why in the F would he name his plane the Lolita Express? It's basically thumbing your nose like I'm above the law. I have a plane called the Lolita Express. Are you kidding me? Just super dark, man. And I think as time goes on, we're going to hear more and more about these types of groups. Like this NXIVM cult that just got busted. The girl from, her last name is Mann, from Smallville. Have you guys read this story? If not, look up NXIVM. It was supposed to be some woman's self-help, empowerment group, and it turns out it was just a sex cult. And the actress from Smallville is charged, and he's looking at, doing real years, real time for trafficking. And there's women in this NXIVM group that, have the leader's initials branded, burnt into their skin. That's part of the ritual. And you find out that he's being funded by 2 billionaire daughters. The NXIVM cult. Look it up. So what do you guys think? Leave me your comments below and let me know if you think that all these groups are real or if people are just basically forming these ideas through confirmation bias, just basically finding ways to piece things together, like saying, well, Bill Clinton has a past with this stuff and he knew this guy, and this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, supposedly had a plane called the Lolita Express. So if Bill Clinton was on that plane, he was involved in this. And, the whole time not knowing if that's ultimately true or not. I just want to know what you guys think. So leave me your comments below and let me know. Is this all real? Do you think there's a there yet? And if so, what should be done? That's probably a whole other podcast. What should be done about these groups? And can anything be done? Can anything really be done? That's a scarier thought. I mean, as Rockefeller said, I care not who makes the laws, show me who makes the money. There's a lot to be said in that comment. So, again, leave me your thoughts below. Let me know what you think, guys. Thank you all so much for listening to episode number 77 of the In a Crowded Room podcast. And I will be back tomorrow with more. All the best.